Hello, everyone. Welcome to Start the Week with Spencer. This is our weekly webinar here at Doman International, where parents join us from all around the world, parents with children with special needs, and they ask us their biggest and toughest questions. I'm joined here by Colleen Hudson, who is the Director of Representatives here at Doman International and is usually the first person to talk to new parents when they contact us. Today, we have a bit of a special topic, that we have for all of you, which is 5 New Year's resolutions that every parent of a child with special needs should make this year for 2026. And actually, these are really New Year's resolutions that I think every parent should make, even parents with neurotypical kids. So even if you don't have a child with special needs, I think you're going to find these helpful. But I think if every parent with a child with a special need or developmental delay made these resolutions for 2026, it would make their lives and the lives of their children much, much richer and easier this year. So I will get started. So the first New Year's resolution that I have is, number one, ask someone for help that you've been avoiding. So in my experience working with parents of children with special needs, very often they need help, but they're afraid to ask for it. And sometimes this is help, like they need help from volunteers, maybe to help with certain parts of their children's treatment. Sometimes it's asking for help with pickups and drop-offs for their other children, or preparing meals, or sometimes it's even asking for help for fundraising or some financial help from someone who could provide that. And a lot of parents, I think, are fearful of asking for help, maybe because of pride or rejection, which are understandable. I think many of us avoid asking for help because of those reasons. But what I always tell parents is that when you ask people for help and they agree to it, you are almost always enriching their life more than you're enriching your own. Because for many people, knowing that they are playing a part in helping a child with special needs, it might be the most meaningful thing they do all day or week or year. This is what I constantly hear from people who volunteer and give time to help with the Doman Method with children on our program. They will often tell me how going to help with patterning is the best part of their day, or that they just get huge amounts of pleasure and excitement watching a child find new skills, discover new abilities that they didn't have before. I mean, it enriches my life so much seeing the children make those gains, and knowing that you are playing a role in that very often is far more meaningful than going to Starbucks to get a latte, or even for many people, sadly, even going to their job. And so what I always say to parents is, asking for help, often you're doing the person a favor. And, there are many people who go about their lives and they actually don't even know what their purpose is. Sometimes when you ask to help your child, you're giving the person an incredibly meaningful purpose that they aren't just willing to do, they're excited to do. So that's why my first New Year's resolution for parents is ask someone for help that you've been avoiding asking. And most of the time, by the way, in my experience, they will say yes. I think it's very important to be very clear with them about what you're asking. Give them times, give them dates. It's important to be specific, because if you're too general with an ask, oh, could you help me sometimes with coming over and patterning? That actually isn't as helpful to the person as saying, hey, could we find 2 days a week where you could come over? Could we agree on those days right now? Because then they know exactly what's expected of them. And by the way, they might even go beyond what you're asking them to do. Colleen, any thoughts about that, asking someone for help?
Yeah, just Just ask. I mean, I'm very shy also. I don't like to ask people for help. I prefer to handle everything myself. Um, but I generally find that when I do accept help from people, they're happier about it even than I am a lot of the time. You know,
Mhm.
it's, yeah,
Yeah.
it really gives other people an opportunity to show their care for you. So don't deny them that opportunity.
Perfect. Well, listen, we are going over the 5 New Year's resolutions that every parent of a child with special needs should take in 2026. By the way, if you have any questions or if you'd like to propose a resolution, throw it up and I'll be happy. We'll be happy to give our feedback on it. Okay, so the second resolution that I have here is more of a realization for parents, but it once you've made this realization, it leads to making different kinds of choices, which is it's essential to realize that you're the expert in your child. Uh, the reason why I think it's important for you to kind of realize this and own this as a parent is once you do, I think you'll be able to do what your child needs more consistently and with more confidence. Right now, parents live in a very different age than they did when my grandfather, Glenn Doman, started this work in the 1970s. In the 1950s. When my grandfather started this work in the 1950s, there were no resources for parents of children with special needs. None, right? A parent was usually told, your child is hopeless and you need to put your child in an institution. Now, sadly, some parents are still given that advice today. But for the most part, most parents live in a different world today where now instead of no solutions, there are a million solutions, right? Where they're being told by professionals and other parents online and family members and ads popping up in their social media feeds constantly about do this, do this, do this. And that creates a lot of confusion for parents. And, it can make parents question themselves. And it's important that you realize you're the expert in your child. My grandfather Glenn always used to say that if he heard a mother's intuition was telling her something, he doesn't even have to know what it is. He would put money on it that it's probably the right thing to do. He would bet money on it, and that's been my experience as well. So I think it's very important once parents realize that they're the experts in their children, they can start to listen to their intuitions more. They can feel more confident in not just choosing what to do with their child, but saying no when they need to. And this is very important. Parents, because they're constantly being told what to do by others, they have to either learn to say no directly or sometimes maybe indirectly by just knowing that isn't for me. I'm going to avoid that. And if you're unable to say no, that can create a lot of challenges because now everything has become a priority, right? You're doing all these things. It's kind of like going to a buffet. There are so many options and you're not doing what your child needs most. So listen to your gut as a parent, realize you're the expert in your child. Of course, you're going to need help from others. There are others who have knowledge and tools that you don't have. That's what we do here at Doman International. We partner with parents to help them. But in the end, parents have to listen to their intuition. And that's why we even tell parents when they come in through the door, as Colleen knows, sometimes parents will arrive at Doman International and they'll be kind of scared that we'll tell them to do things for their children they're not comfortable doing. And, they'll say, I've heard you have a difficult nutrition program. We don't know if we can do that, And what I always say to parents is, first of all, before we ever explain what to do, we explain why we do it. And even if you heard why we're recommending something, if you were not convinced at that point and you said to us, no, we're not comfortable doing this, we'd say, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. By the way, we have over 400 treatments for children with special needs. If you tell us you're not comfortable with one of them, we have 399 other choices to choose from. And actually, I appreciate it when parents tell us up front when they're not comfortable with something, because it means we don't have to waste your time or our time talking about something that you're not comfortable doing. Let's focus our time on something more productive. So even when it comes to Doman International, I tell parents, no, in the end, you have to make the final decisions for your child. You should never do something you feel is unsafe for your kid. You should never do something you feel uncomfortable with. And if someone doesn't take the time to explain to you why something should be done, right? If they kind of brush off your questions or they explain something in a demeaning way or condescending way, that should set off your alarm bells. Again, you're the expert in your child, and you should feel completely confident saying, no, we're not going to take that route. Any thoughts on that one, Colleen, realizing you're the expert in your child?
Yeah, I think for parents sometimes, especially when you haven't, like maybe you're not around kids. I mean, I've always been around children. I taught, and so it was a little easier for me. And then, of course, I've always had the Doman Method as my background, so it was easier for me as a mother to say, no, I know what's best for her. But there's still moments where you second guess yourself, and that's when you have to stop and say, no, what is my gut telling me? What is my intuition telling me? Because it's what's right for your kid is at your heart, and nobody else can feel that way. So don't second guess yourself as much as you possibly can.
Yeah, and one of the things we like to point out to parents is, over the last 7 decades, we've seen more than 40,000 families. And one of the first questions when a family comes to our clinic for an appointment and we evaluate their child, one of the first questions we ask is, who's the first person who realized your child had a problem? And 80% of the time, it is mom. It's not pediatrician. It's not neurologist. Mom, the most common answer is mom. And the second most common answer, interestingly, is grandmother. And then father is third. And then a pediatrician is number 4. And this is because parents intuitively, from the moment a child is born, parents are evaluating to see, does this child have a problem? My grandfather always used to say, when a baby's born, the first thing a mother does is she counts the fingers and toes, right? To see, okay, is my child okay? And that's why we've always kind of laughed at this idea that, parents are in denial and they don't want to know about their children. No, parents want to know if their child has an issue, and they want to start acting on it immediately if they can. So, yes. Okay, perfect. Well,
I wanted to mention one little thing, that there are studies, that show that the particularly the mother-child connection is absolutely visceral. We are animals, and that it actually continues well into life. That a mother, like the even the chemical balance between a mother and child, like you can tell that this child came from this mother many years after they're born. So it isn't even just a baby thing. But even more reason for moms, particularly dads also, to really trust their gut and know, your kid is a particular part of you. I mean, obviously, if your child came to you in another way, adopted, doesn't matter because you're with them all the time. You observe minute things about them that nobody else in the world ever would. So.
Yeah. What, Colleen, just because we're interested in brain development, including the brain development of well neurotypical kids. One of my favorite recent studies I was reading was about they took babies and they played theme songs from different TV shows, and they found that the themes of their mother's favorite television shows led to a release of neurochemicals that were that feel good. In other words, like even in utero, if mom was watching a sitcom and the theme music came on, mom was relaxed and happy, and then child was as well. So yeah, I thought that shows the interconnections between mom and child. Okay, my next point, the next resolution, we're going over the 5 resolutions that every parent of a child with special needs should make in 2026. The next resolution is, it's essential to choose 3 priorities for your child for the next year and focus your time and attention on those priorities. And this is especially important because children with special needs often have many different symptoms, right? They might have issues with speech development and balance and coordination and focus and attention, and they might have gut issues. They might have learning difficulties, reading problems, math problems, writing problems. And it's so easy to focus your time and attention on each of those symptoms. But what we have found is that if we pick 3 major areas to focus on with the Doman method, we get the best results actually in all the areas. So what we do with every family that comes to Doman International to our clinic, we give them at every appointment 3 big picture goals. And the 3 big picture goals are 3 major developmental wins we want to achieve in these next 6 months. So for some children, that might be to say their first words. Another child, it might be to take first steps. For another child, it might be to improve focus and concentration. For another kid, to learn how to write. So it completely depends on that child and what their needs are. But what we found is, okay, if we pick the top 3 needs for a child, and usually that's our clinical staff working in conjunction with parents and what their priorities are, we can then decide, okay, here are the 3 biggest things we're working on. And interestingly, when we address those biggest issues, usually even those other symptoms that may not be as important, they're still important, but they're maybe not as big a challenge for the child, we often tend to find that in those areas the child improves as well. And I think it's a wise friend once told me, if everything's a priority, nothing is a priority. And in the end, you've got to choose what your child needs the most. So I actually think parents should sit down and say, what are the 3 biggest needs my child has right now? And if you're already on the Doman International program, you should communicate those things to your Doman International staff coach. Now, very often, if you've come to us at your last appointment, that's already been discussed. But sometimes parents will come to us and they'll say, even parents on our program, and they'll say, you know what, I've really been thinking about it, and I think we have to focus on this. And that is really helpful. And 99 times out of 100, parents are spot on, and we say, "Yep, you're absolutely right." And we then will start to customize the treatment plan for the child to address those specific needs. So choose 3 priorities, and I would say to parents, it's okay if you've got a list of other things that your child needs help with, but it's important that you have a clear picture of what those 3 priorities are. And of course, if you're coming to Doman International, this is something you can discuss with your staff coach, and they can help guide you with making those choices. Colleen, anything you want to say about priorities?
No, everything you said is exactly right. And it's so easy to get pulled in different directions. And I find this a lot with the parents that I talk to. They are, they're a little all over the place because they've been pulled all over the place. They've been told, oh, focus on this, oh, this, no, this. And also when their child is having symptoms that are diverse, it's like a game of whack-a-mole. Like, what do we do? Where do we go first? So yeah, really sitting down and setting priorities is key.
Yeah. And another thing, one of the reasons why we started to create big picture goals at Doman International is that sometimes families would come to our clinic. This was years ago. And we would evaluate the child, and we'd see all the places where the child wasn't quite at peer level. And, we'd give the family a customized program, and they'd come back 6 months later and they'd say, we're really concerned about our child's progress. And we would say, but look at everything your child's doing. Your child maybe is reading his first words, and your child is, writing for the first time, and your child has improved in this area or this area. And the parents would say, yeah, that's all true, and we're very happy about those things, but they haven't improved in this, right? And it was like, oh, wow, we didn't realize how much of a priority that was for the family, right? And usually there's a very good reason for that, maybe something that wasn't communicated to us. But once we know that, okay, got it. That's something we really need to focus on. Your child isn't able to use the toilet independently yet, and that's creating all these issues. Okay, let's focus our time and attention on that. So that has really taught us to be in clear communication with parents about what priorities are, and focusing on that. Okay, the fourth, my fourth resolution is to refocus a bit of time each day on reading. This is, I think, a good resolution maybe for everyone in the world. But I think, especially for parents of children with special needs, having a few minutes each day where you're sitting down and reading is a great idea for a few reasons. So, first of all, reading allows you to actually learn directly from subject matter experts, people who have actually done research, taken time to write books on subjects that might be helpful for your child. Now, there are really, I want to make it clear, when I say that you should do reading every day, I don't necessarily mean it has to be reading about treatment for your child. For some parents, that might be what you want to do, right? And you say, no, I want to take a few minutes each day and read books specifically that will help my child. Great. But for other parents, it might be just, I need a few minutes at the end of the day to, relax and learn about something else that I care about, or, get some opportunity just to enjoy the art in classic literature or something like that. So for some people, it might be, I want to grow and learn with my reading. For others, it might be, I just need a couple of minutes where I can truly relax and kind of be absorbed in a different world. I think whatever the kind of books you're drawn to, it's better for you to be reading that book than spending the last few minutes of your day doom scrolling on social media, which is usually the alternative, or maybe watching Netflix. But by the way, two activities I often do, so I'm not judging people for doing them. But I think getting some time to read is a great idea. Most people tend to either read in the morning or in the evenings, right? Usually those are the two easiest times. A lot of parents tell me the evenings are best after the children have been put to sleep. Now, we do have a lot of books about the Doman Method. I don't even have all of them for you, but we do have the Doman Method from Special Needs to Wellness, which is our number one book that we recommend for parents who want to learn about the Doman Method. We also have a book called Answering Autism, specifically for parents with an autism diagnosis. I have a book here that I don't mention enough that was written by my dad, Douglas, which is called From Immobility to Walking, especially if you have a child who cannot walk yet because of a developmental delay. This is a great, great book. But listen, even if you're interested in different topics, I tend to read a lot of nonfiction. That just happens to be me. I know, Colleen, you read more fiction than I do, but I know you read both nonfiction and fiction. But just to show you some books that I pulled off my bookshelf. So this is a book I read recently called The Man with a Shattered World. This is by an author named Alexander Luria, who studied men who had brain injuries during World War II. But actually, a father on the program recommended this book to me because he said, this man and your grandfather must have read each other's work because they kind of speak the same language. So Alexander Luria is great. Another book I pulled off my shelf, this book, Serve to Win by Novak Djokovic. The reason why I like this book is a lot of the nutritional things that Novak Djokovic has done. He's the number one tennis player in the world and has been for almost a decade. He talks about the diet that he eats, and his diet is actually almost identical to the diet of children on the Doman Method. So I really like it. I think if you'd like to know as an adult why certain dietary changes are helpful, it's a great book. And some people like to read self-help, so I pulled the Tony Robbins book off my shelf if you're interested in that. I don't have a lot of fiction books. Colleen, any books that you specifically recommend for parents? I know I'm putting you on the spot.
No, that's okay. Absolutely. I like to, when it comes to evening time, if I'm reading at night, I tend to reread books that I love because it helps settle my brain before bed. So I reread things like the Anne of Green Gables series, or the Harry Potter series. That's my fiction, is more going back to old books, because it's hard for me actually to find new fiction that I like. Or I read classic fiction, Jane Austen, um, stuff like that. But I do read a lot of nonfiction also. Right now, I'm reading a memoir by a woman who was very involved with Facebook in the early years, and it's called
Oh,
Careless People, and
huh.
it's very interesting. I'm really enjoying this, the whole, just learning about it from that inside perspective. She's not with them anymore,
Got it.
and she's a Kiwi. She
Oh,
came to them,
interesting.
yeah. So she came to them, pushing for them to be more in the diplomatic space, because they were not in the beginning at all.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to hear her perspective on that too, as a non-American.
And I'm guessing she's saying a lot of people that were involved in the creation of Facebook were careless in the choices they were making.
Very much so. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a little bit of a side comment, but I've watched a couple of interviews recently with the heads of AI companies, artificial intelligence companies, and I'm just struck by how little they think about the deep questions. I was watching, one of the CEOs being interviewed, and he was asked, what's the kind of moral template that you've used to create your AI system, and he couldn't give an answer to it. Like he had not thought deeply about how AI could affect morality in people, and I was just struck. So it just shows a lot of the people, unfortunately, that are creating social media and technology companies are not very focused on ethics.
Yeah. Or the human cost of it.
Yeah,
Now, Facebook seemed to have had an idea in the beginning that, oh, we're going to connect the world, and they loved that idea in theory, but they were very naive about what that meant, and really what it could end up being in terms of connecting, good, like people with good intentions versus people with not so good intentions. So
yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, actually, I got a lot of feedback recently, Colleen, about a Instagram post popped up in my news feed, and it was a mother that was talking about how she and her daughter like to look through Instagram together, like as like a bonding activity. And it was like it looked very sweet, and it had nice visuals of her and her daughter looking at. And then I realized, oh, it's a paid advertisement by Instagram. And so I posted it, and I said, parents, don't fall for this, because one of the things that the social media companies are now doing is they're saying, oh, we're placing these filters so objectionable content doesn't reach your children. And to a certain degree, okay, that's great. But actually, a lot of the things that are affecting kids are also posts being made by other kids. It's not necessarily someone who is actively trying to do harm to the children. Sometimes it's, kids see a photo of other friends of theirs getting together at a party, which seems innocuous, but it creates a deep sadness in the child because now they feel left out. So a lot of the time, the harms of social media don't come from enemies, they come from friends. And especially with young children, teenagers who are very impressionable and very sensitive, it can be really, really harmful. So, I thought it was pretty outrageous that in this ad, they were trying to make it out that, like, if you're a good parent, you and your child enjoy social media together. Yeah, it just didn't sit right with me. And it didn't sit right with most of the parents I talked to about it either. All right. So, resolution number 4 was to read to Get some reading time for yourself as a parent each day. Okay, my last resolution is something that I've been focusing more of my own thoughts on recently. And the resolution is I recommend that parents double how much you speak to your child each day. So, I think one of the things that almost never hear spoken about in the whole field of child development is how much parents speak to their children. It turns out that research shows that parents vary greatly in how much they talk to their children and the number of words they use. So it turns out that some parents use as many as 30,000 words a day when they talk to their children, and some parents use as little as 2,000 to 3,000 words per day. So imagine one parent speaks 3,000 words, another parent speaks 30,000 words. So that means the one parent is speaking 10 times more words to the child than the other parent. Now, we could talk about this from a cognition standpoint. What does it mean for a child to be hearing 10 times more vocabulary in a day than another child? Well, we actually know the answer to that because even children that grow up in homes where a rich vocabulary is used, by 18 months of age, already have more developed speech than other children. So even by a year, children who hear more words speak more words. And so from a speech development perspective, it's very important. But also children that hear more words score higher on cognitive tests. They're better in reading comprehension. They read at a younger age because they are growing up in a more linguistic environment. And I feel like this is something, of course, most parents go day to day speaking to their children, but they don't think about talking to their child for a child of special needs. They don't think of speaking to the child as a treatment, or if they have a neurotypical child, they don't think of it necessarily as stimulation. But actually, the more you speak to your kid, the more you explain things to them, the more you orient them so they know what's coming up or what's happening. That makes a huge difference. And the more sophisticated your language is, the better. So parents who kind of speak, it's better to speak slightly over your child's head, so they have to kind of reach to understand what you're saying, than to speak down to your child. Because if you use a richer, more sophisticated vocabulary, children are linguistic geniuses. They will tend to figure out from the context of what you're saying what you mean. But if you speak down to your child with a very limited vocabulary, that's going to hold them back in terms of developing their comprehension, and it's also going to hold back their speech development. So that's why I'd say to parents, try to double how much you speak to your child. Try to use new vocabulary each day with your kid that you don't usually use. One good way of doing this, by the way, is reading to your child, because by reading, you're, first of all, speaking obviously to your kid, but you're often using vocabulary that you're not using on a daily basis. And I want to say, for parents of children with special needs, this is especially challenging in the beginning, but also especially important, because sometimes when you have a child who doesn't talk a lot, it can be difficult to know what to speak about. And we really recommend to parents that even if your child can't speak or can't speak very much, you should talk to your child throughout the day, explain things to them, orient them, talk to them about the schedule, tell them what's coming up. Very often they understand far more than adults think they do. And so that greatly helps them with knowing what to expect. And also, not only is it good for their cognition, it's often very good for behavior, because children that know what to expect and what is expected of them will be far more likely to cooperate and work with adults rather than a child who doesn't know what's going to happen. So yeah, as much as possible, even with a child who doesn't speak, explain things to them, talk to them. And children know intuitively when they're being respected. Children really appreciate when an adult speaks to them in a respectful way, in a way that shows the adult knows they're innately intelligent. And very often, if you speak to your child in that, richer, more sophisticated way, you'll see your child's view of themselves and how they interact with the world change. Any thoughts on that, Colleen?
Yeah, it actually reminds me of a time when Olivia, my daughter, was about 18 months old, and we were feeding geese at a creek we were right at the Valley Green Inn there. So we were feeding the geese with bread, and one of the geese decided that it didn't want to wait for the bread to hit the ground. It wanted to take the bread out of Olivia's hand, which was alarming because it was a big goose and it was coming at her. And so I sort of shoveled the goose a little bit away because I'm her mother. I was like, no, excuse me. And then so that Olivia didn't get upset and understood what was going on, I said, wow, I said, that goose is feeling a little aggressive right now. I think we're going to just move over here and give it some space. And there was a woman standing there and she said, that's a big word to use for such a little kid. I thought, first of all, why are you saying anything to me? Second of all,
right.
It was a very odd thing. But I looked at her and I said, well, how else is she going to learn the words if I don't say them? And she said, I would say the goose was mean. And I said, okay. And I walked away, but I thought, that actually isn't even accurate. The goose wasn't mean. I mean, that was... So usually more richer language can even be more descriptive. The kids might not know, who sits down and says, what's the dictionary definition of the word aggressive? But they get the sense that there are shades of meaning when you use richer vocabulary, that it isn't all mean or nice or, whatever. So I think that goes a long way too.
Yeah, I think that your comment about how different words have different shades of meaning is really important because it fundamentally changes the way we think, right? It's if we encounter some kind of issue in life and I say, hey, Colleen, I need your help with a problem, that is quite different from saying I need your help with a challenge, right? And now, a problem and a challenge could be the same thing, but the way we look at those two things is quite different, right? The way we react to those two words is very different. The emotions surrounding them are very different. And I agree with you. I think when we use a larger vocabulary with children, we can awaken them emotionally to things that they may not be aware of, because now they understand there are different shades of meaning and in different parts of life, and the words you choose really do make a big difference. Yeah, I when I learned from the research that some parents use 30,000 words a day and some use 3,000, I did the math, and it turns out if you speak 30,000 words a day to a child from the time they're born until the time they're 18 years old, you'll speak about 200 million words to a child in the first 18 years of their life. But if you only speak 3,000, they'll hear 20 million instead of 200 million. And it's just wild to think that there are some children that are hearing 180 million words in the first 18 years of their life that other children don't hear, and all the amazing advantages that come with that. Or the disadvantages if you don't. And it's something, again, most parents do for their child's entire childhood, and some parents never give it any thought of how they talk to their kid. I think they think, oh, when my child goes to school, they'll learn, and they don't realize that maybe the way you speak to your child is more important than the school that you choose. Similar to your story, Colleen, once I was with my nephew, Caden, and someone overheard me talking to him, and they said, how old is he? And I said, oh, he's 20 months old. And they said, then why are you talking to him like he's 20 years old? And, that really struck me. And now he's 16, and, he is in, all AP classes, and he's a straight A student and very emotionally intelligent and mature. And I often reflect back on that's the way we all spoke to him. And I think that made a huge difference, in the way he was raised and the way he thought.
I want to say too, yeah, Caden is a teenager, and so they're known for being not so talkative.
Yeah.
And Olivia is now 21. And I have to say, we've never lost the habit of talking. I mean, I come from a very talky family anyway, but we really, even through the teenage years, even now, especially if we're driving around in the car or anything like that, it's the very natural thing to talk about things, to mention things. And I think that's something that you don't even recognize is going to pay off when they're small. But when you're in the habit of constantly having little conversations, it just never, you don't lose that. And, she's weathered some significant challenges through her teenage years, and still we've kept talking and kept talking. And I know from other parents, friends of mine, that their children didn't, kind of stopped talking to them for a few years there, and it was really hurtful to them, and trying to figure out how do we start conversations. But I think they weren't so much in the habit before that of talking and talking and talking. So if you start it now when they're little, and especially if they can't talk back to you just yet, you're benefiting their brain, but also the connection that you have with them, and you're bringing them into. I mean, I've always, at an age appropriate level, I've explained to her, as you said, Spencer, like, what are we doing today? What's going on this week? What am I thinking about getting things? Just even the day-to-day things. Oh, I've got to go get some things for dinner. I'm thinking we're going to have this and this. We go to the market, all of that little stuff, but just narrating everything makes a difference. You're bringing them into what it is to be an adult too, and a member of society.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that really struck me, I was reading a pretty well-known book called Man's Search for Meaning, written by a man named Viktor Frankl, who was a Holocaust survivor and a psychiatrist. And one of the things he noticed when he was in the concentration camp was that people who seemed to be more intellectual often did a better job of surviving than people who weren't. But it's not because necessarily they could solve problems easier. I mean, in the end, in the concentration camp, everyone was basically in the same boat. But what he said rather is that they were able to find reasons to keep going. Even when there was no food and seemingly no hope, the people who were the most well-read were able to, just find some other reason, excuse, motivation to keep going. And he said that he saw others who didn't necessarily have that, who just kind of gave up. They were just like, and that really struck me, because I never really thought that not only the way we raise children, of course, I know that raising a child who might have better understanding can help them in so many ways in life and make their life richer. But I never really realized that maybe in really terrible life circumstances, it could also be a way that they can find, it can lead to grit. It can lead to them finding a way to navigate a difficult circumstance that no one could be prepared for. All right. Well, listen, those were my 5 New Year's resolutions for parents. I'll do a quick recap. If you joined late, feel free to go back and watch them, because for each thing we listed the resolution and then we talked a bit about it. My first resolution is it's important for parents to ask there's someone that you need to ask for help that you've been avoiding. That was resolution number 1. So ask them. Resolution number 2 is it's important you realize that you're the expert in your child. Number 3 is it's important for you to choose 3 priorities for your child and focus your time and attention on those priorities. Number 4, it's important to refocus sometime each day on reading for you as a parent to read. And number 5 is to double how much you speak to your child. And of course, if you have any proposed, if you feel like there's a New Year's resolution that you'd like to propose that are better than mine or that you'd like to add, I'd love to hear them. Yeah, but now we can go to questions. So if you're joining us right now on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube, go ahead and type your questions into the comments box and we'll get to them in order. Colleen, did we have any pre-submitted questions this week?
I'm looking now. I didn't have any earlier, but I'm going to see if any have come in. Let's see if I've got any from.
While you're looking, we had a comment from Annabella who wrote, hearing that I should trust my instincts and my expertise as her mom always brings me calm. That's beautiful.
I have a question from a couple weeks ago that we didn't get to. So this is from Esther. She said, what's the best approach to have my 7-year-old boy do something when he's determined not to do it? Should I give him some time and let him decide, or try to convince him about the benefits of doing it? Now, I have not spoken to Esther, so I don't know if her child has special needs or not. I'm presuming probably.
Yeah.
But that's the question.
Well, first of all, I want to commend Esther for a very thoughtful question. I honestly, I think this is a question that every parent faces at some points, and probably for most parents all the time. Yeah, when to know when you need to kind of explain things to your child and maybe even motivate or push them to do something, and when to give them some space. I think that this is very much, and Colleen, I'd be interested in your thoughts as a mom yourself. I do think that this is a kind of scenario specific question. I think it depends very much on the moment. But I think Esther there's a lot of wisdom in the way she framed the question, because she asks, should I explain something to my child? And I think when in doubt, explanation can go a really long way. I remember I'll give an example. Once I was watching another nephew, not the one I mentioned before, my nephew Jackson, and he was about 2 years old, and his parents were going to a doctor's appointment. And so I was watching him, and as my brother and sister-in-law left their house, he started crying, as many 2-year-olds do when their parents leave. And really, started screaming, crying that they were leaving. And as they were leaving, I walked over to the window with him and I showed them getting into the car. And I said, Jackson, your mom and dad are getting into the car. They're going to the doctors. They're probably going to be there for about 2 hours. Mom is getting this checked out, and then they're going to come back, something like that. And he just immediately quieted down, like within, a few seconds, he was like, okay. And I was really struck by that. And, when I look at 2-year-old Jackson, did he understand everything exactly that I said? Like, did he understand when I said your parents are going to be away for 2 hours? Did he know exactly what 2 hours meant? Probably not. Did he know at the age of 2 that 2 hours was 120 minutes? Probably not. But I think that when you explain things to children, it does a few things. First of all, you're appealing to them on an intellectual level of, here's the information. And for many people, information is enough, right? Including children. Okay, I got it. Thanks for letting me know. I think it lets the child know that someone knows what's going on. Sometimes we're in positions in life where maybe we're not in control of things, right? And it's scary. And then someone else shows up and they're like, I've got this. And that is incredibly reassuring. And so I think what I said to little Jackson, hey, parents are doing this. This is why they're going away. I think maybe from an emotional standpoint, he realized, okay, I think Uncle Spencer has it handled. Maybe I don't have to worry about it. So it reassured him in that way. And then there's a last part of it, which is kind of maybe under the surface, but is very important, which is when you explain something to someone, it shows that you respect them, right? When I take a few minutes to explain something to you, you know, okay, this is someone who actually knows I'm a smart person, they care about me. And I think that very often, because children are never explained things, they see that. And I think completely understandably as disrespectful. You know, it's you know, even as adults, it doesn't happen as very much as adults, but if you've ever been in a place where something was going on that you didn't understand and you went to another adult and you said, hey, why are things happening this way? And they shrug you off and they're kind of like, it's that way because it's that way. We find that incredibly annoying and disrespectful. And so, but we do it with children all the time, you know, like kind of shrugging off their questions or their needs, not thinking we have to explain things to them. And I read an article, I'm going to have to fish this out, maybe about a year ago, that was basically all about, you know, if we spoke to other adults, like if anyone spoke to adults the way adults speak to children, we'd hate them, you know, and yet adults speak that way to young children all the time. So to answer your question, when in doubt, communicate, explain things to your children, let them know why things are the way they are. A lot of the time when you do that, they will cooperate. They'll understand it at a deeper level. And even if they don't, even if they decide I'm going to put up a fight about this, at least you know as a parent, you have done the due diligence. You've done everything that you can to explain things. Sometimes with children, you do have to say, listen, honey, I know you don't want to do this right now, but it's very important for this, and this reason that we do. And at least that way, you know, well, I've given them an explanation so that even if they're not happy right now, later they can look back and say, oh yeah, mom and dad, you know, explained that to me. Colleen, any additional things you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I agree. I think that explaining things does go a long way. And you know, sometimes your kids then will come back to you and say, "Well, is this something? Do I have to do this right now?" You know, and if you can explain why, yes, it has to be done right now, versus, okay, actually, there's a little space here. I don't have to. That can be very hard too for children to be asked to turn on a dime, you know, or what feels to them like turning on a dime. If we give them 5 minute warning, their experience of 5 minutes may not be like I used to actually use an egg timer sometimes for things when Olivia was small, because I wanted her to recognize exactly how much time this is that she has before we go to the next thing that has to be done. Um, because it just, you know, I've tried to be reasonable with her and treat her like a human being and say, I'm not going to just drag you, barring anything unsafe. I'm not just going to drag you from here to there without telling you, giving you due, due warning.
Yeah.
But the egg timer used to help a lot because it was a solid example of, you know, there was no perception of time. It was the time. So that can be a help too.
Yeah, it's amazing how many children, I agree with you, that the use of the timer puts them at ease. I've seen so many kids who will throw temper tantrums, but as soon as parents start to say, no, we're going to watch TV for 5 more minutes, we're setting the timer now. Children, okay, 5 minutes is up, fair, you know. Yeah, so it makes sense. All right, I will take one more question, and then Colleen, I'll ask you, you know, to share when upcoming appointments are available at Doman International. We've got a question here from Virginia who says, "My son likes working with a computer and drawing, writing stories, etc. What other beneficial activities can he do?" So, Virginia, because I know that you've come to these before, I'm presuming you mean things outside of the Doman program, maybe. You know, because obviously there are many things in the Doman program that can be very helpful. But if you're asking specifically about our program, let me know. If you're talking about kind of extra activities, anything for a child which is stimulating, meaning they can learn something new from it, and which is healthy, and I would also add to that, has a little bit of a challenge to it, can be very good, So for some children, that might be doing things like puzzles. For other children, there might be, certain games like crossword puzzles that they enjoy. And especially what you mentioned, things like he likes writing, he likes drawing. So there are, certain apps that are kind of educational, dynamic apps that are good for, improving writing skills, for example. And then I would also add to that, physical activities, like, playing certain sports or games, can also be very helpful. Virginia, if again, I'm presuming you probably don't mean the Doman method per se, but if that's what you meant, feel free to join in next week and we can talk about that as well. All right, Colleen, could you any thoughts on upcoming appointments at our clinic?
Absolutely. So we have January, and the first appointments we have in January are January 5th. We have an interesting situation where there are a number of weeks where there's just one spot left. I don't know if every family realizes that we purposely limit the number of kids that we see, initial kids that we see in any week, because we want to make sure that we have plenty of time to spend with you. You're going to be having as much time as you need with our team. So we have an appointment available for January 5th, for January 12th, January 19th. And then we will be in Italy at the end of January. And once again, we've got one space available for January 22nd and one for January 27th. And these are for our 3-day initial live appointments.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So we've got, those are appointments available were those Philadelphia specifically?
Philadelphia specifically, yes. And
we
then
do
Italy
have
at the end.
We do have, remote appointments that are available if you cannot travel. We are going to our European Institute in Pisa, Italy, for any European families in the weeks of, I think it's January 22nd. Hopefully is it 22nd and 29th, Colleen?
You're absolutely right. Yes. So the appointments we have available in Italy, the live appointments, are January 22nd and then January 27th. So 22nd to the 24th and 27th to the 29th.
Thank you. And then in February, we have appointments in New Zealand.
Those are full.
Those are full.
Full.
Yeah. I do recommend that parents contact us if they're interested, because we might be having some after the trip.
That's true.
With Colleen, with Jordan. In March, we have appointments in Serbia and Croatia. In April, again, we have appointments available in Italy. In May, we have appointments in India and in the UAE. So yeah, if you're interested in coming to any of Doman International's locations around the world, or interested in an online appointment, please reach out.
Sure.
Colleen, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you. Great session.
Bye, everyone.
All right. Bye.